Welcome back to another episode of the Million Dollar Body Podcast. I'm Coach Nate, and today we're talking about the truth about carbs. So when we talk about carbs, the first thing that comes to mind for so many people is basically, can I eat them? Aren't they supposed to be bad for me? And are tortillas really the sin that keto folk make them out to be? And so we're going to be diving into that today. We're going to be talking about what specifically makes carbs kind of the demonized thing in the fitness industry where people are going so low carb or going keto or being just anti-carb, and then how we can still have our carbs and eat them too. So, or you get it. So first of all, what are carbohydrates? And just make sure I want you to stick around till the end, because I'm going to give you at the end, if you want it, a valuable resource that I put together basically outlining my guide to the hierarchy of carbs, the best to worst. And on that, as well as I have some proteins and fats, just something that you can print off, slap on your fridge real easily, and never have a question about, is this actually the best carb for me? What's a good carb? How can I eat these? And then hopefully we'll take care of some of the other questions you might have about carbohydrates, timing, nutrient density, fiber, that sort of thing on this podcast. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit. So if you have any other questions as we go through this, feel free to just let me know, and hopefully we can pick up if I missed anything else, okay? So first of all, what are carbs and why are they so demonized? Well, the first thing you have to know is that like a sweet potato is a carb, rice is a carb, bread is a carb, pasta, fruits, and also just having big tablespoons of sugar, that's a carb too. So what's the difference between having tablespoons of sugar or drizzling honey on your tongue and actually just chewing on a unbaked sweet potato? What's the difference there? And from a chemical perspective, what happens when you eat a sweet potato, when you eat sugar, is as that goes into your stomach, it breaks down into glucose, blood glucose, or sugar, okay? So the sugar turns into like a different type of sugar. Table sugar is more fructose than glucose. But the sweet potato does the same thing. It breaks down into sugar. So at the end of the day, all the carbs you eat turn into sugar, which is not necessarily what most people expect. They think it's going to be something a little bit different, or the sweet potatoes aren't actually sugar. It's not quite the same thing. But in actuality, the chemical process is going to be the same. Now, obviously, there are going to be very different aspects between eating a sweet potato and eating maple syrup, for example. And I'll keep coming back to the same example over and over again as we go. But I just think that's one of the easiest ways to make this point. So when you have that sweet potato and it breaks down into glucose, what happens to it next? Where does that glucose go? I'm going to use the words glucose and sugar kind of interchangeably. The only real difference you need to know is that glucose is basically like sugar, like table sugar. It's very similar to fructose, okay? Just our body can absorb it a little more naturally. Glycogen is what happens when that glucose goes into our liver or goes into our muscles. So I'll use those two terms, okay? So what happens is that glucose is now swirling around in our bloodstream, looking for a place to go. Now, in order to get that out of our systems and keep it from being stored as fat, what happens is our first order of business is our body's like, hey, we need to get our red blood cells energy and we need to get our brain energy. So just slurp that shit right up. Let's have some energy for our brain for later. Let's absorb that as much as we need from whatever we're doing from a chemical perspective with our body, where you would need more energy for your red blood cells. So if you're working out more, you're going to need more energy in the red blood cells. If you're fighting something off, you might need a little bit more energy. If you're working really hard on a project, you might need a little more brain energy. It really depends on your activity levels, what you've been doing previously. But that's basically, think of that as the top tier. That's where everything goes first, because those are our priorities in our body. It keeps us alive. Our brain's very important to keep us alive. Do things like read and write and do Facebook Lives and all those sorts of things. All big important pieces of our brain function. So the next thing, okay, after the red blood cells are satiated, they're happy, and then our brain is happy. It's got enough glucose to keep it going. Because by the way, guys, glucose is your brain's primary fuel. A lot of people are like, oh no, it's ketones. Ketones is like the backup generator, okay? And while that can be an efficient way to run your brain, and it's not a bad option, glucose is your brain's primary fuel source we'll just put that out there. If you need a source on that, let me know and I can probably provide one for you. The next thing that happens is that glucose goes into our muscles and our liver, and it gets turned into glycogen. Okay, now glycogen is kind of our body's energy source. Glycogen can be used for like creating more energy for running, for doing a triathlon, for weightlifting, for anything where you're outside, like moving around, like moving weights, anything active. That's what glycogen's for, okay? So as you can imagine, the more muscle you have and the more active you are, the bigger that glycogen store is to get burned off. So if you're just, okay, let's think about like a 250-pound bodybuilder. He's jacked, he's super big. In this scenario, he's probably really angry also. I don't know. We're just making it up. This is not a real person. We'll call him Tony. Okay. So Tony's out there, and if he has not worked out, if he just ate a big meal, okay, he has Thanksgiving dinner, and then doesn't do anything, and then 3 hours later, he eats another big meal, not much of that glucose that he's ingesting is going to need to go to his muscles and to his liver because he's already filled it up with a big meal. However, in an alternate reality, Tony has that first big meal. He goes and works out. He burns off the glycogen in his muscle cells, in his liver. And then what happens is then he has that big meal again. And rather than the glucose, the sugar getting stored as fat, that gets slurped right up by the muscle cells in the liver because he's burned it off already. So not only is it important to remember that it's highly dependent on how much muscle you have, how much like muscle tissue you're carrying around with you, but also how much are you using it, okay? Because if you're super strong and you have all this muscle tissue and you're just a big, strong person, but you're not actually being active, then you're still not gonna have a super high carb requirement. A lot of people say, oh, muscle tissue burns 50, 100 times more calories than fat. And that's not quite true. It's actually pretty minimal when it comes down to it. I think I'm pretty sure it's like a fat cell will burn about 2 calories, or a pound of fat will burn 2 to 4 calories on a daily basis. So 1 pound of fat burns 2 to 4 calories, and a pound of muscle will burn like 8 to 12, depending. So it's not a lot different, right? It's kind of a small amount. So a lot of people say like, oh, muscle burns more than fat. Yes, you're right, but not excessively. But that's what we're talking about, muscle at rest. When you have muscle and you're actually active, you're going out using it, you're weightlifting, you're running, then your muscle is going to be using a lot more carbohydrates, burning a lot more. It just becomes this furnace, right? So got to have the muscle, got to use it, and that's where our second bowl is, okay? Our second level. First level is brain and red blood cells. Second level is liver and muscles. And then the third level, that's fat, okay? The next 3 levels on the way down, fat. First level is subcutaneous. That's when you pinch your waist and you're like, I wish I didn't have this right here. That's subcutaneous fats under the skin. Not that big a deal at the end of the day. Next level is visceral fat. That's around your organs. Now we're talking about getting dangerous. Those things are producing dangerous molecules that mess with your brain, slow down your function, create inflammation. It's all bad. And then the next level below that is organ fat. After your visceral fat's all full, your body's like, I guess we'll just die. So it puts fat like into your liver, into your like around your like inside of your actual organs. It's really, really, really bad, very unhealthy, causes all kinds of chronic diseases. Basically anything you can think of, from cancer to diabetes to Alzheimer's to stroke to heart disease, everything like that. And it will be exacerbated from having more organ fat. That's a no-no. Don't let it get to that point, okay? So if you want to eat more carbs, very simply, you can end the podcast right here. If you want to eat more carbs, have more muscle, move more often. Period. Okay. It's all about activity level. It's all about energy. How much are you using? How much do you need? If you're sitting at a desk 5 days per week for 10 hours, typing on your computer, hopefully you don't hunt and peck, then you don't need a lot of carbs. Sorry, you don't. If you're outside, if you're building houses, digging ditches, and then working out, you need a lot more carbs. So it's a balance. Okay. It's not okay to say carbs are bad or carbs are good. Carbs are a necessity based on what your body's asking for. Okay. So people are like, oh, my body runs on ketones. It's all good, man. It's all gravy. Well, yeah, it runs on ketones as the backup generator. But then what happens when you have that donut or you have a beer? Your body's like, holy shit, what are you giving me this for? And it starts just storing that fat because you have not trained it effectively to use the carbohydrates. So we want a body that's not only efficient at burning fat for fuel and using the ketones, but also efficient at burning carbohydrates, because chances of you never having a potato again in your life are fucking zero. Okay, so just, you can write that down. If you're taking notes right now, write that down. Big zero, draw a line through it so everyone knows. Okay, so what's the difference now between, if we talked about, okay, if carbs are sugars essentially at the end of the day, why would we not just eat donuts all the time? Why would we ever have a sweet potato? That's a great question. Super glad you asked. So here's what happens is when you have a donut, when you have a tablespoon of sugar, when you're just pouring honey all over your face, I don't know what you're into. I'm assuming that could be something. I don't know. I just want to speak to everyone here. So when you are doing that and you are having these simple sugars. So on one side of the spectrum, we have simple sugars. That's like table sugar, honey. Fruit is going to be more of a simple sugar. Donuts. The more processed foods, pasta, white bread, are going to be more on the simple side. The less processed foods are going to be more on the complex side. Complex simply means having more fiber in it, okay? So that's going to be like sweet potatoes, regular potatoes, brown or white rice, beans, that sort of thing. It's going to be on this side, whereas the sugars, the donuts, the candy, that's all going to be over here. So when you have that simple sugars, what happens is your body takes that hit of glucose fast, okay? It doesn't have to break that down. It's already pretty broken down. Imagine like if your body wants to turn a tablespoon of white sugar into glucose, it doesn't take long in your system to do that. So what you get is a massive spike of blood sugar, boom, up and down like that. So you get that little bit of energy, then you get dropped right back down. You're like, I'm hungry. I want to eat some food, because what's happening is your body doesn't have the insulin to be able to balance that out. Okay, so it starts sending weird signals to your brain. You get weird hunger signals. You get tired in the afternoon. That's what we get from processed simple sugars over here. On the complex side of things, what's going to happen is it's going to take longer to break down. You've got more soluble and insoluble fiber. And there's really, it's not important that you know what the difference between those two are. All you need to know is that the more fiber something has, the slower it digests, and the less carbs your body's going to be able to hold on to. So I'm not saying do any sort of crazy math when you're looking at stuff and be like, oh, this one's got 3 grams of fiber. So if we subtract that from the total grams, and then we take the sugar alcohols out, and then we divide that by the square root of the apple pie I'm about to eat. No, you don't need to do that. You just need to know that more fiber is generally better and less fiber is generally worse, because what happens with more fiber is you're going to have a slower digestion. So rather than having that massive spike up and down, you're going to have this slower up, slow release, and slow back down. So especially when we're talking about entrepreneurs, sales professionals, high performers who need a fix for their energy, who are doing a lot of different things on a daily basis, who are going out and having to make sales presentations, who need to be on top of their game, that are doing interviews, whatever else that your life looks like, and energy is a priority for you, then we need to be paying attention to this piece. If energy is not a priority for you and you don't give a shit what you feel like on a daily basis, and if it's just cool if you just sit at a desk and just kind of rot all day, then that's fine. You can eat whatever donuts you want to eat as long as it stays within the carbohydrate energy bandwidth for you. If you set the number, you're like, I can have 70 grams of carbs for my energy level, and you want all 70 of those to come in the form of a donut, knock yourself out. Doesn't matter, okay? But if you are someone who cares about how it feels to push yourself and you need that focus, that performance, that drive, then this is important. Pay attention, okay? So the more fibrous, more complex the carbohydrate, the better you're going to be feeling when you eat it, okay? So this is just an important piece. So how can we optimize ourselves to be able to absorb more carbohydrates into our muscles, red blood cells, and brain, absorb less into our fat stores, and generally feel like a winner all the time? Good question. Glad you asked. Thanks again. Really appreciate you stopping by with all these amazing questions ahead of time for my podcast. So what we need to be doing is first and foremost be thinking about energy expenditure. Okay. So this means that the more you can move on a daily basis, the better, as we previously discussed. Also, the more you can be actually building muscle when you move. So that puts resistance training one notch above cardio, because cardio is not really going to build muscle, cardio is going to keep you the same. But as anyone who's ever been running for a while knows, you take 2 weeks off, what happens? It takes a big dump. It's a big steamy dump right on your cardio. And you're like, when you get back and you're like, oh, it's hard to run again. Yeah, because cardio is cheap. It comes and it goes. Weight training to build muscle is expensive. Your body doesn't just want to just toss you a bunch of muscle, okay? It's hard to build muscle. It's hard for your body to do that. It's an expensive process. So when it does it, it takes it seriously. And it costs more, but the benefit is going to be a lot bigger on the back end. So resistance training, always more important than cardio. Even if you're a fat loss phase, you want to make sure that you're doing everything you can to maintain the muscle mass that you already have. And if possible, which is very difficult, build a little bit more, recomp rather than just drop fat, because being a smaller version of your former self is not necessarily what people are looking for. We want to look good. We want to feel confident. We want to look in the mirror and feel awesome. So take that resistance training to the next level by training your bigger muscle groups, thinking about training the biggest muscle groups. We talked about this a while back, the quads, the glutes, the hamstrings, the lats. Those are going to be the bigger muscles in the body, which are going to give you more bang for your buck, allow you to really start building more muscle. But then think about this. Okay, after you finish a workout, what you've done is not only have you worked out and trained your biceps and do you look awesome, right? Everyone who's gotten a pump and looked in the mirror and be like, man, I look awesome. You know what I'm talking about. But not only have you done that, but you've also depleted all your glycogen. Okay, so if you've been following this whole thing, you work out, the glycogen in your muscles is depleted. Now what? Now is the perfect time to absorb more carbohydrates, because you've taken those out, and now you can put the carbohydrates on top of that, basically penalty free. Okay, and I don't want to put through it and be like, oh, this is a naughty food and you shouldn't have tortillas. But I want to help you be smart with what you choose to eat when you choose to eat it. So if you're like, damn, I'm gonna go to grandma's house and she's cooking up pancakes because it's grandma, then you need to be really smart about what you're gonna be doing before you hit grandma's. So before you roll up, douse your pancakes in maple syrup, you want to make sure that you've done a workout that's depleted the glycogen, so that when you do have a high sugar, simple carbohydrates donut bender, that most of the calories there are going to replenishing what you burned off, right? It's kind of, this is how bodybuilders and anyone who's got large, impressive, knobby muscles structures their cheat days. They'll work out really hard, and then they'll go have whatever it is that they wanted to have originally, because they know that they're not going to be punished for eating more carbohydrates, because they've already done what they needed to do from a training perspective to optimize their body to absorb more of the calories and more of the carbohydrates. Okay, so that's just a brief overview on carbs. So think of carbs, especially like the simpler the carb, the more this is true, as a signaling mechanism to your body. What's happening is when you absorb those carbs and they turn into glucose, your body becomes what's called anabolic. A lot of people think anabolic steroids, carbs are steroids. No, anabolic simply means growth. Okay, catabolic means like opposite of growth. I don't want to say decay. That feels like the wrong word, but ungrowth. Write that down too, next to that big zero from earlier. So when you're anabolic, it just means that your body's gonna be storing something somewhere. You're gonna be growing. So you can be anabolic and gain fat, you can be anabolic and gain muscle, but either way, carbs make you more anabolic. So making sure that you're putting yourself in a position to be anabolic that builds muscle is gonna be two things. Number one, getting that workout in before, like we talked about, depleting the glycogen in your muscles and in your liver, so that when you do have that big meal, it's gonna grow the muscles. Two, making sure that every meal has protein with it. If you're gonna be anabolic, you might as well be putting the proteins and the amino acids from the proteins into the structures of your body, the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, the joints, repair and rebuild. That's what protein does. That's why we say protein at every single meal. So I don't even think, like, by this point, you should know we have protein at every meal. We don't eat unless there's a protein source with it, okay? Like, well, I'm hungry, there's only, no, you don't get to eat it. Put it away, put it in your pocket, save it for later. Pour some of the collagen in your mouth before you eat that cookie. So think about that when you are making these choices, that carbs are going to break down into sugar. They're going to help you be anabolic, which can be good or bad depending on your activity level. So making sure you're optimizing yourself by training ahead of time and also having protein with it. Now, if you're like, okay, I get it, but also, like, what's better? Is it beans or brown rice? Is white rice or brown? Okay, there's a lot of different options, a lot of different carbs out there. I actually have an awesome resource for you that I want to give to you. Everyone in my $1 Million Body group is getting this for free. It's something that I created that you can actually print off, slap on your fridge, and then never think about it again because I already did all the work for you. So if you want that, simply go to n8trainingsystems.com/group, and I will give you that free resource. It's in the group. And we're just looking at it. Everyone's just looking at it right now. Everyone's loving it. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest. People are just saying that to me all the time. I don't actually think that's 100% true. But anyways, that's free for you if as a member of the $1 Million Body group. So if you're not a part of it already, get your ass inside the group so I can hook it up. All right, if you have any other questions about glycogen, about glucose, about priming your body to absorb more carbs, about training, about fats, about proteins, let me know, because I'd be happy to make sure that you are very clear on what you need to be doing to get the results that you want for your body. At the end of the day, it's all levers, right? We want to make sure that we're controlling our inputs, controlling our outputs, and manipulating the levers that are going to give us the biggest results. So check that out. Let me know how I can help you. I'm super excited for this free resource. So if you want it, just let me know and I'll give it to you. All right. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.